And do they work or do they not work at all? There's no defense against Luma. Familiar Pirich beckon again, Kamilna. For them the blood of the Slavs. We have no aggressive intentions toward third countries.
Russian President Vladimir Putin today, October 2, at Valdai, finally named the root causes of Russia's war against Ukraine. He said he personally asked twice for Russia to join NATO, but was turned away both times. He again threatened the West with war, saying Europe and the United States will soon go too far and Russia will eventually attack. He responded to Trump by saying that if he's not afraid, he should come and see for himself what kind of paper tiger he is. And of course, he stated that sanctions don't work at all. And then he switched to some kind of strange street slang and said that Russians have a saying, "There's no defense against a crowbar." He used this to argue why sanctions don't work. He added that he doesn't feel like an emperor and urged Russian women to wear kokoshniks. In addition, the Kremlin made a stern statement today that Russia will take action if Europe continues to detain oil tankers from Russia's shadow fleet. This comes after French special forces seized a tanker from that very shadow fleet, and Vladimir Putin called it piracy. Although just yesterday, on October 1st, Russia said it had absolutely nothing to do with that tanker. So in this episode, we'll briefly go over the main statements made by Vladimir Putin at the Valdai Forum today, October 2nd. My name is Alexei Pechi, and before we start this episode, I want to remind you that on this YouTube channel, several news and analytical segments are released every day. So you always stay updated on all the news. That's why I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel, so you don't lose it. Give it a like and write any detailed comment under this episode. This really helps promote the video on YouTube, and I appreciate it. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support the YouTube channel of Alexei Pechi. Use any format that works best for you. This covers sponsorships via YouTube, Patreon, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, bank info, or cryptocurrency. I will be grateful for any support you can give. So Putin said a lot today, but let's go through everything step by step. I'll start with the main point right away. Putin stated that Russia's plans to attack NATO are supposedly nonsense that is impossible to believe. And Putin dared to say that if Europe believes in Russia's plans to attack NATO countries, then the leaders of European countries are incompetent. Quote from Putin, "They say that Russia is going to attack NATO, but how can you believe such a thing? It's impossible to believe. If they really believe this, they are incompetent." Well, if I were in a European's place, I would be concerned here, because when Russians say they are not going to do something, most likely they are preparing to do it. Because before attacking Ukraine and before the start of the full-scale war, the Russian dictator and his entire entourage made exactly the same statements. On November 3, 2021, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova called Western media and intelligence reports of Russian troop buildup near Ukraine's borders fake. The Russian dictator Dmitry Peskov repeatedly stated that Russia has never attacked anyone first, and that statements about the threat of war are empty, baseless attempts to escalate tensions. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, January 21, 2022, he even allowed himself to mock then United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken and said that he was spreading panic that Russia had no intention of attacking Ukraine. February 15, 2022, 9 days before the start of the full-scale war. Lavrov stated that reports about a possible Russian attack on Ukraine were information terrorism. February of the year, days before the start of the full-scale war, Lavrov stated that reports about a possible attack on Ukraine are information terrorism. He repeatedly claimed that war between Ukraine and the Russian Federation was unthinkable. And even on the morning of February 24, 2022, when the invasion had already begun, Putin continued to lie, stating that Russia, quote, does not plan to occupy Ukraine, which, as we know, turned out to be a complete lie, and the Russians are occupying part of Ukraine. But let's get back to today. Putin stated at Valdai that Russia will not attack NATO, as he says, sleep peacefully. But Russia will respond to the militarization of Europe. Quote, Russia's countermeasures to the militarization of Europe will not be long in coming if anyone wants to compete with the Russian Federation in the military sphere. To each his own. You know, overall, I think Russians were ecstatic today because Putin often switched to some strange expressions like this, to each his own, or there's no defense against a crowbar. Well, basically, whatever back alley you crawled out of, that's the slang you use. By the way, Russians, let me make a small remark for those who come to the comments and write, "How dare you insult Russian officials?" I've insulted them and will keep doing it. By the way, you can express your outrage even more in the comments. After that, Vladimir Putin decided to respond to the statement by United States President Donald Trump about the paper tiger, saying that Russia is supposedly fighting against the entire NATO bloc. In this regard, according to Putin, this characterization given by the American leader is incorrect. Next is a quote. "I said Russia has been fighting not with the Ukrainian armed forces or Ukraine, but essentially with all NATO countries for years. If we are fighting the entire NATO bloc and are still advancing confidently, then what does that say about NATO itself? What does it represent?" He told his interlocutor, "It's just a paper tiger, and then maybe something else." Well, then go ahead and deal with this paper tiger. And there you see everything happens differently, Putin tells us. Stop. The bold jerk named Putin said a couple of minutes ago that Russia is not at war with NATO and Europeans, sleep peacefully and so on, and said that Europeans who think Russia will attack are incompetent. Then suddenly the same bald guy. This person claims Russia has been at war with NATO for a long time, so are you at war with NATO or not? And to wrap up the NATO topic, Putin whined a little in front of the Russians. Putin started whining that Russia tried to join NATO twice, but both times was rejected. According to him, the first time the initiative came from the Soviet Union in 1954 and the second time from Russia in 2000 during the visit of United States President Bill Clinton to Moscow. Next is a long quote from Putin. Russia, seeking to eliminate the grounds for bloc confrontation and to create a common security space, has twice even declared its readiness to join NATO. Russia has twice declared its readiness to join NATO, and both times was refused right from the start. The war in Ukraine could have been prevented if NATO had not moved closer to Russia's borders, and if Ukraine had maintained real sovereignty. This could have been avoided if relations with the Biden administration had been handled differently. If Ukraine had not been turned into a destructive tool in the hands of others, if the North Atlantic Olympics had not been used for this, then Moscow would not consider it a threat. If they want to, let them, Vladimir Putin said at the time. So does that mean it wasn't the reason for the war? So does that mean NATO getting closer to Russia isn't a threat? So Finland and Sweden have moved closer and have simply increased Russia's border with NATO several times over. Putin says if they want to, let them. And Putin also stated, quote, "If Trump had been in power in the United States in 2022, the war in Ukraine could have been avoided." Well, let me remind the unwashed Russians here. Russia's war against Ukraine began in 2014. But Russians just started screaming when Putin switched to some kind of thug slang from the back streets. In short, Putin stated that the sanctions don't work. He said they've already exhausted all their potential. Now Russia will strangle the West with its own sanctions. And now I'll give you a quote from Putin, without any commentary.
They work, they don't work. Either they've completely or to a large extent lost their effectiveness. Either way. And no matter how much potential a single country or a group of countries accumulates, every power still has its limits. Well, the Russian side, the audience knows. We have a saying among our people, there's no defense against a crowbar. Except for another crowbar. And it always shows up, you see. That's the essence of what's happening in the world. Another crowbar always appears.
And finally, Putin said that Russia has already ideologically defeated the West. Do you know why? Well, because in Russia there's now a trend for traditional folk costumes, especially kokoshniks. And then Putin called on Russian women to wear kokoshniks and some Russian outfits. Let me add, Russians, remember the bast shoes and the lamp. Stop wearing those Western sneakers and shoes already. That's foreign to you. It's some kind of Western trend. It's the harmful influence of the West. Switch to bast shoes, kokoshniks, and your traditional outfits at last. Show that you are true Russian patriots. Well, when Putin ran out of his own crazy ideas, he started reading a poem to the participants at the Valdai conference. I won't go there though, I'll spare your sanity. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.